All and welcome to the Gestalt IT Rundown, your weekly look at the IT news of the week. I'm your host, Rich Stroffolino. I'm the editor at Gestalt IT, and joining me across this great land of ours, and indeed not far from my heart, is of course my co-host Tom Hollingsworth. Tom, say hello to the fine people.
Hello to the fine people. It's a pleasure to be back with you this week to talk about the news and maybe make a joke or two.
Let's get on with the news and the funny. We have some interesting government-related news. It just struck me we're going to do kind of a government theme here for the last half of the show, but just wanted to hit a couple quick hits. Probably the biggest news that I saw of something really interesting is that Google just released a 72-qubit quantum computer, which they're saying could lead the way to quantum supremacy. This is based on Google's 2014 9-qubit design. So, seeing a little bit of growth in the intervening 4 years. And right now, the plan is just to use it for test error rates and scalability, but possibly using it as the platform if those tests are successful and fruitful, to building an actual computer that could do better than a classical computer in more general use. So, Tom, is the quantum apocalypse upon us?
Not quite yet, and I think it's important to point out that, yes, quantum supremacy is the actual term that they used, but it does not mean that Skynet is taking over. What it actually means is that quantum supremacy is the point when a quantum computer is as useful as a regular computer. One thing I noted from the article, the error rates are still a bit dodgy. So maybe Google's going to get that under control, and if so, I can't wait for my new iPhone Quantum to come out.
Well, and as we've discussed, they're already laying the groundwork. We've seen Microsoft, IBM, others laying the groundwork for SDKs based around this. So it'll be interesting if they can actually get these to work, that they'll actually have kind of the software support there to make them actually useful once the hardware is there. We also had some interesting news out of Ohio State. One of the first Spectre exploits to be seen in the wild, to be able to view Intel Secure Enclave. They're calling it SGX Spectre or Pector or whatever. Basically, it's Spectre with SGX added in there for the Secure Enclave. And they say it's able to exploit the race conditions between the injective, speculatively executed memory references and the latency of the branch resolution. Not too surprising. That's why I didn't really, highlight this. I mean, it was just a matter of time before these researchers kind of got their hands on these exploits and, put them to their logical ends. Anything notable that you saw about this, Tom?
It just goes to show you that once you own the processor branch pipelining system, you pretty much own anything that it would ever connect to that CPU, including the quote unquote trusted enclave. So Intel's going to have to really rethink this. And I think, realistically speaking, as trusted as they want that enclave to be in the future, they're going to have to find a way to firewall it off from the rest of the CPU. So in the event that someone does do something silly like, another Spectre 2 or Poltergeist or whatever the hell they're going to call it, they need to be ready to basically isolate the rest of the system from that.
All right, and finally, Satya Mania is kind of one of the big narratives since Satya Nadella has taken over as the CEO of Microsoft, but it's always kind of hard to get hard numbers on that. We can look at their earnings and say, oh, they're up quarter per quarter, whatever. But what I thought was really interesting was something from the Seattle Times showing that boomerang hires from Microsoft, aka people that have left Microsoft and then have come back to the company after a number of years have seen a significant increase since Satya Nadella took over. Historically, the rates have been about 10 to 11%. However, in 2015 through 2017, we're seeing rates closer to 15, approaching 16%. In fact, the year that he was brought on. Tom, any surprise here? I mean, I know outside of just, hey, this is a new CEO with a new vision, they've revamped a lot of their evaluation processes, made those a lot less brutal. But any surprise here that the Satya Mania kind of leaks over into actual corporate culture?
Well, I would really be interested to see what the numbers are. Are these Gates people that left under Ballmer and are coming back now that Ballmer's gone? Or are they Ballmer people that left to go make their mint in some kind of speculative unicorn startup world and found out that that's a really hard thing to do? And like the drudgery of 9 to 5 with a steady paycheck and the occasional free jujubes in the cafeteria.
Yeah, maybe it's a maturing of the overall startup scene in Silicon Valley or Seattle or West Coast or whatever you want to call it, as also a result, but doesn't hurt the myth of Satya Mania. All right, Tom. Now, I don't know if you can remember a time before the Qualcomm Broadcom merger kerfuffle, but I can't. I just live in it now. I dream about it. It really dominates my every waking thoughts. And now there's another new wrinkle to it. We thought we were going to get some resolution with a March 6th shareholder meeting of Qualcomm to vote on some new board members. These board members would all be very friendly to a Broadcom acquisition/merger. However, a new player has entered the market. The U.S. Department of Treasury's Committee on Foreign Investment. They put out an order basically ordering Qualcomm to delay voting on the new board for 30 days. They're looking into this, and the reason that they have jurisdiction is just before Broadcom bought Brocade, they decided to switch their corporate headquarters from Singapore to a little place called Delaware. Now, they've always had a Silicon Valley reference, but this is important for tax purposes, and it turns out for regulation as well. The best part about this, I don't know if the U.S. Department of Treasury is going to be doing all sorts of investigation. They just want to hear from both sides, make sure there's going to be no shady dealings or whatnot. The reason this needs to be in here is this quote from Broadcom in response to this delay. Quote, "This was a blatant, desperate act by Qualcomm to entrench its incumbent board of directors and prevent its own stockholders from voting for Broadcom's independent director nominees." These are publicly traded companies, and I just love the blunt hatred that each of them has for each other at this point. Tom, does this lead to any concern that if this merger ever goes through, there's just going to be so much bad blood that it would cause the combined business to fail?
I go back to the whole Cisco WebEx thing. When Cisco bought WebEx and WebEx employees were telling everybody that they still worked for WebEx, not Cisco, and it took a house cleaning to figure that out. CFIUS is getting involved because that the moving of the headquarters was supposed to happen for the Brocade acquisition, and I guess it's stalled out, or maybe even never was going to happen in the first place. But this is, yeah, you're right. This is like, you don't see this kind of stuff coming out of PR departments. This is like the equivalent of dropping F-bombs in public kind of thing for companies. And you're right. It's going to lead to some massive hurt feelings, especially because you look at, Qualcomm has been dropping some not so subtle hints that the reason why they're so upset is because they think that Broadcom is undervaluing their chipset manufacturer business. And it always goes back to something my dad used to tell me. He used to say, "Son, if I could buy them for what they were worth and sell them for what they thought they were worth, I wouldn't have to work anymore." So I think it's a question of whether or not Qualcomm thinks that their value is understated from Broadcom, or if Broadcom thinks that Qualcomm is trying to overstate their value. And I think that that's really realistically why they were trying to seat the new board members, was to just get a peek inside of there and kind of push and shove. I mean, this is on the verge of hostile takeover at this point. And those are real fun. Like, get your popcorn ready, because if this goes hostile, we are going to see like gladiator style cage matches and stuff. There's going to be like Vince McMahon rules for like acquisition of talent, and like, somebody's going to defect and get hit with a Singapore cane or something.
Yeah, they're going to have to do the board of directors meeting on thumbtacks or something like that just to get this out of the way.
Yeah.
In other government ruling news, I guess, we're seeing some interesting news coming out about ICOs. We had some very interesting figures by TechCrunch came out recently that I thought were notable. But the Financial Crimes, Enforcement Network released a letter stating developers and exchanges operating in ICOs would be liable to register as money transmitters and comply with relevant statutes around anti-money laundering and know your consumer rules. Basically, if you don't let the government know that a whole bunch of money is getting moved, you're going to be hit with a felony. The letter provides for jurisdictions for other agencies. So in the case of an ICO being more of a commodities future kind of vehicle, that would then fall under the jurisdiction of the SEC or the CFTC when possible for oversight. And this is combined with a reporting out of TechCrunch that showed, it's not just the news is hearing a lot about ICOs. I mean, it seems like every time you open TechMeme or the Register, someone else is registering for some weird ICO for a company you've never heard of. Well, it turns out they're raising a poop ton of money. I couldn't think of a better word than that. So since 2017, blockchain-based startups have raised about $1.3 billion in venture funding, which seems like a lot of money. It turns out not when you account for ICOs, which tripled that, raising $4.5 billion. This is also paired with the fact that a lot of these ICOs fail almost immediately or fail before they even get started. Of the 902 companies that sought to raise an ICO, TechCrunch found 142 failed before the closing of the fund, and 276 failed soon after fundraising. So not only is a lot of money changing hands, these are extremely risky. There's all sorts of claims that these are confidence schemes, basically dressed up as some kind of more democratic venture funding or something like that. Any surprise that we're seeing increased regulation around this? I mean, basically, whenever there's money, right, someone's going to want to get involved, and it's not surprising by the government.
Exactly. This is the thing I've never been able to understand. When the egalitarian folks tried to tell me that Bitcoin was the wave of the future because it does means that there's no longer a centralized regulatory system based around banks and governments, and money wants to be free. I'm like, then why are you taking cash? Egalitarian methodologies, those don't pay the rent, those don't pay the gas bill. So yeah, and everybody wants to go out and they want to be the next lottery winner. That's really all this is. ICOs are not some kind of way to make sure that everyone is building a better future that is like Starfleet, where we don't use money anymore. No, it's really all about trying to hit the next big Bitcoin lottery. You can be the guy who, the Bitcoin pizza dude who paid like 100,000 Bitcoins for a pizza. And we always laugh now because it's like a $300 million pizza. You want to be that person. And it's not going to happen now because the government's really starting to look at this because, smarter people than you have figured out how to game the system, and you're getting taken for a ride. So let the government step in, shut down some of this stuff. Maybe a little regulation is not a bad thing to keep you, Joe Consumer, from getting screwed out of your lottery ticket.
Well, and I'm sure at the end of the day, it's also, I'm sure at the end of the day, someone's going to be paying taxes, or the government would like someone paying taxes on that $4.5 billion one way or the other. So that's also very important as well. I do think also, I'm not opposed to an ICO on principle by any stretch. I mean, I think it's an interesting way to either get some kind of stake in an early company, but it's such. I mean, it literally within the last 2 years, the first time anyone ever heard of any of these. It's not even the Wild West. It's like Lewis and Clark are going out there in a canoe and trying to figure out like where the coast is. So the fact this actually seems a little early for me for government oversight to be stepping in, even in this limited capacity. If it's literally just just setting up the rules of how funds can transfer and that kind of stuff. But when you're flashing around crazy money like that, it's basically just begging for government intervention at this point. All right, it wouldn't be a Gestalt IT rundown if we didn't talk a little smack about Oracle's cloud ambitions. And so this comes up in an interesting story about the Pentagon trying to get their cloud on. They had a $1 billion contract to move their infrastructure to the cloud and recently slashed it to $65 million after claims that the winning bid unnecessarily favored Amazon Web Services. The contract was awarded to Reen Cloud, who is a cloud managed solutions provider, and this drew protest from Oracle, saying that they filed a complaint with the Government Accountability Office, basically stating that they're a front for AWS, which has the audacity of it's a very Oracle response to make accusations like that. We're seeing to their credit, though, so I've never heard of Reen Cloud. I'm not really up on my cloud managed solutions providers. When I went to their Twitter page, literally the first thing in their Twitter bio is that they're like this, AWS gold certified partner and stuff like that. So maybe, if you did the barest of research, you would think that they might be a front for AWS. However, they maintain that they will work with any cloud provider that the government chooses to use for them. As part of this bid, it doesn't necessarily state which public cloud provider they're going to use. I'm sure that's going to be some part of some long, convoluted cloud migration process because, let's face it, it's the government. What's really weird to me is, Tom, what's the purpose of when someone wants to migrate to the cloud? What do they want to do generally?
Generally, they want to save money and they want to operationalize IT.
Okay, so would the word agile ever come up as part of a cloud transition?
May have heard that once or twice somewhere.
I mean, it just seems to me that the entire purpose of this, I'm sure, is to shed legacy infrastructure, make them be more nimble, maybe able to spin up different projects a lot faster, simplify workflows, automate, blah, 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 IT buzzwords. And of course, literally at the outset, this comes to a screeching halt. And weirdly, not because of, they didn't check this box, but anti-competitive concerns. It'll be interesting. Does it concern you at all, though, that the Pentagon wants to move stuff seemingly to possibly to a public cloud? Does that seem weird to you at all?
No, it doesn't. They're running out of space inside the Pentagon, I'm pretty sure. If the people who are doing this know what they're doing right, they're not making the S3 buckets public and readable. And I'm sure that they probably have some kind of crazy rules about what can be stored out there, classified versus sensitive data or things like that. But Larry, I know you watch the show. I don't know if you watch it live, but I know you watch it on recording. So let me give you a hint, because I have a little bit of experience in bidding government and federal projects. One, you probably need to be the cheapest. So obviously you're out. Two, it doesn't help when you complain that you got beat. All right? So maybe what you need to do instead of complaining that they're going with Amazon is find out why. And three, I know this sounds kind of sad, but this is kind of how the government works. Maybe you should stand up your own shell company to stand in for Oracle Cloud. Slash some rates. Give them some favorable deals. You might actually win something.
Well, and that does play into outside of the snark. That does play into one of the major hurdles, not just from technology or a market share perspective, is that Amazon does have a lot of the secondary kind of business infrastructure already out there in the form of all these certified partners that can, not necessarily that they prefer AWS, but hey, we have experience with it. Of course, we're going to use AWS because we've been doing it for 5 years now, and Oracle's brand new to us. So that might be an additional challenge as well. And kind of going along to this, what the Pentagon might want to consider is something new that Microsoft is offering. They're basically combining their Azure stack, which allows you to run Azure services or Azure Cloud in your own data center, with their Azure government stack. And they're pitching this directly toward government agencies like embassies that need to be able to run, that want to be able to adopt cloud methodologies or what have you with it, but not lose data governance, especially in sensitive places where you're operating in a foreign country. Maybe you want to keep everything in house. So very interesting news there as well. That was just a little. I thought that was an interesting refinement on the overall Azure service. I know they're playing a little bit of catch up with AWS at this point, but interesting that that Microsoft is now, I think Azure has gotten to a place of such strength at number 2 that they're able to hit up not necessarily fringe use cases, but a little bit more niche in this case, which could prove lucrative in the long run.
Yeah, I think Microsoft has figured out that AWS is not the right cloud for everybody, and so they're going to pick off those use cases that AWS is not a good fit for, and they're going to make a load of cash very, very soon because, AWS has the lead, and Microsoft is sitting pretty in second, and Google doesn't seem to care anymore. So yeah, enjoy making as much money as you can until we go back to the other cycle of everything needs to be on premises again.
Yeah, when we discover that everything is woefully insecure and the apocalypse is coming now that we have quantum supremacy. That just about does it for the Gestalt IT Rundown. Remember, you can catch this on our Facebook page, Gestalt IT, or facebook.com/Gestalt IT, or on YouTube. Just search for Gestalt IT on YouTube. And we also do a post at gestaltit.com where you can find all sorts of super cool enterprise IT coverage from basically all across the data center. It's cool stuff. Tom, where can people find you if they want to read more of your stuff?
Well, you can check out the hot off the presses snark at my Twitter account, which is Networking Nerd. You can go to networkingnerd.net, and as Rich said, there will be some great longer think pieces and briefing reviews at gestaltit.com.
And you can find me on Twitter at Mr. Anthropology and gestaltit.com as well. We'll be back next Wednesday, every Wednesday, 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time, live on Facebook. Tom, thank you so much. And until we meet again, remember, have a super sparkly day.